The Auction of the Forgotten. The sky above was dark. Thunder rolled like the growl of a hungry beast. Below, thousands of aliens gathered inside a giant metal dome. Bright lights hung from the ceiling, casting a cold glow on the stage. This was not a market. It was a slave auction. Cages lined the walls, stacked on top of each other like machines in a factory. Inside those cages were living beings, captives from lost wars, prisoners of power, and those no one would miss. Some begged, some cried. Most had already given up. A tall alien with 4 arms stood on the stage. His skin was blue, his eyes sharp and cruel. He slammed a staff on the floor. "Next product," he shouted. The cage rolled forward on metal wheels. Inside sat a girl, silent and still. She looked about 17, with pale skin and long black hair. Her arms were thin, her clothes torn. But what caught everyone's attention were her eyes. They were empty. A small screen lit up above her cage. Puro PRT-42. Species: human variant, engineered. Status: faulty. No memory, no speech, no combat ability. The crowd laughed. One alien whispered, "Why even bother selling this trash?" "She's broken," another said. "Probably made in a lab and dumped." The auctioneer grinned. "Yes, yes, a rare piece of history, a forgotten relic of the old human projects. Fully owned, no family, no past. Starting bid, 10 credits. No one raised a hand. The auctioneer tried again. 5 credits. Just 5. She may be broken, but she's still a living human hybrid. Useful for decoration, maybe. Silence. "Free, then," he barked. "Take her for free. Come on, someone take her off our hands." Still, no one moved. The girl sat quietly in her cage, staring at the ground. She didn't cry. She didn't blink. She didn't feel anything. And then a voice came from the shadows. "I'll take her." The crowd turned. A human man stepped forward, wearing a dark coat with a hood over his head. His boots were worn. His face was rough with stubble, and his eyes were hard, like a man who had seen too many battles. It was Captain Raynor. The aliens whispered his name. "Is that him? The war hero who vanished?" Raynor ignored them. He stepped closer to the stage. "I'll pay full price. 10,000 credits." The auctioneer blinked in shock. 10,000. For her. Raynor nodded. The alien laughed nervously. "Sir, she's broken. No emotions, no memories, no strength. Just meat." "I know what she is," Raynor said quietly. "And I know what she was." He tossed a small cube onto the stage. The cube glowed. Payment confirmed. The auctioneer smiled wide. Well, sold to the brave human with too much money. The cage door opened. The girl didn't move. Raynor walked up to her. He kneeled. For a moment, their eyes met. Hers were still blank. But Raynor saw something. A flicker. A spark. Very small, but real. He reached out his hand. "Come on," he said softly. Slowly, the girl stood. Her legs trembled. She stepped forward, like a child learning to walk. She took his hand. Cold skin. No strength. But she followed. Raynor led her through the silent crowd. Every alien stared as they passed. Some shook their heads. Others laughed behind his back. "What a fool," one said. "Humans get so emotional." "Maybe he's trying to fix her," another smirked. Like a lost pet. Raynor didn't care. He led the girl outside, into the night air. His ship stood ready, engines humming. A crew member met him at the ramp. It was a robot with glowing green eyes. "Captain," the bot said, confused. "Who is this?" "She's coming with us," Raynor replied. "She's one of them, sir, one of the forgotten projects." "I know," Raynor said. He looked back at her. "But maybe she doesn't have to stay forgotten." The girl looked up at the stars. For a second, just one, her lips moved. But no words came out. Rayner noticed. He didn't push her, he just led her inside the ship. As the door closed behind them, the crowd at the auction began to forget about the strange man and the broken girl. They moved on to the next sale, shouting and bidding like always. But something had already changed. For the first time in years, Property 42A had left her cage. And deep inside her, where the world thought nothing lived, something had just woken up. The human purchase. The ship's doors closed behind them with a quiet hiss. Inside, the lights were soft and warm, a sharp contrast to the cold, cruel world outside. The girl stood still, her bare feet pressing against the clean floor. Her eyes scanned the walls, the lights, the ceiling, like it was her first time seeing anything that wasn't metal bars and chains. Rayner removed his coat and handed it to her. "Put this on," he said gently. She didn't respond. He wrapped it around her shoulders himself. She didn't resist. Rayner led her down the hall. The ship was old but well kept. It smelled of oil, metal, and something like burnt coffee. His crew watched silently from different corners, some human, some alien, all confused. In the engine bay, a short, four-eyed alien named Miko crossed his arms. "Captain," he said, "is that what I think it is?" Rayner stopped. "It's not a thing. She's a person. No offense, but she doesn't look like one," Miko muttered, glancing at the girl. "You bought a ghost." Rayner gave him a hard look. "She's not a ghost. She's proof." "Proof of what?" Rayner didn't answer. Instead, he took her to the medical room. The scan. He placed her gently on the examination table. She sat there, quiet, her hands folded in her lap. The ship's medic, a woman named Dr. Lin, ran a full scan. Her eyes widened as data appeared on the screen. "Captain, this isn't just some hybrid." "I know," Rayner replied. "She's human-made, engineered, genetically modified with high-end military tech, but her system is locked. Most of her brain is under some kind of shutdown code. She's not broken. She's sleeping." "Can we wake her?" Rayner asked. Dr. Lin shook her head slowly. "Not yet. But there's more. Look at this." She zoomed in on the DNA strand. There's a project tag inside her genes. Project Seraphim. Rayner closed his eyes. "I thought they destroyed everything," he whispered. "The past returns. Years ago, when humanity still ruled its own corner of the galaxy, secret labs created living weapons. Soldiers built from birth to protect, serve, obey. Project Seraphim was the crown jewel. Beings with strength, speed, and the ability to learn love, loyalty, and pain. But something went wrong. Too much emotion, too much humanity. The first batch of Seraphim turned against their makers, not with violence, but with grief. They couldn't handle the sorrow of war. They broke. Governments panicked. The project was buried. Survivors were erased, sold, or silenced. Rayner had lost someone to that program. Someone he loved. The crew reacts. Back in the dining hall, Rayner explained what she was. The crew listened with mixed emotions. Some were angry. Some were afraid. "She's dangerous," said the pilot, a man named Dex. "What if she wakes up and loses control?" "She won't," Rayner replied. "You don't know that." "I do," Rayner said, voice firm. "Because someone I loved was like her, and she didn't break. She chose to be human." The room went quiet. "She died protecting others," Rayner added softly. "No one remembers her, just like this girl." The name. Later that night, Rayner sat with the girl in the observation deck. Stars floated by the window, slow and silent. He handed her a warm drink. She didn't drink it, just stared. "You don't have a name," he said. "They called you Property 42A. But that's not who you are." She blinked. "I'm going to call you Sarah," he said, short for Seraphim, but it also means calm, peace. She didn't react. He smiled anyway. Sarah, that's you now. For a moment, she looked at him. Then, barely softly, her lips moved. Era. Rayner sat back in his chair, heart pounding. That's it, he whispered. You're still in there. The warning. Suddenly, a red alert rang through the ship. Miko's voice came over the intercom. Captain, we've got a problem. A probe just scanned us. Military grade. Unmarked. Rayner's face turned grim. Someone knows. Knows what? Sarah asked, her voice weak but clear. Rayner looked at her. That you're alive. The truth in her blood. The ship floated quietly through space, but inside, the air was heavy. Rayner stood alone in the lab, staring at the holographic display. Sarah's DNA rotated slowly in front of him, a twisting, glowing strand of human and something more. Not alien, but designed. Built, layer by layer, like a puzzle no one could finish. His hand hovered over a blinking file. Project Seraphim. Code Omega. Locked for over a decade. Marked dangerous. Do not reopen. But he did it anyway. The file opened with a sound like a deep breath. Rayner read silently. His eyes narrowed. His fists clenched. The truth revealed. Project Seraphim wasn't just about creating peacekeepers. It was about creating perfect control. Sarah, and others like her, had been designed with hidden code deep in their blood. Instructions that could activate rage, love, silence, or death with a single signal. They were made to obey without choice. They weren't broken. They were betrayed. And someone, somewhere, still held the keys. A shadow in the signal. Captain, Miko's voice came through the intercom. We've intercepted a transmission. It's not from us. Rayner rushed to the control deck. On the screen, a strange wave signal blinked in code. Dr. Lin was already decoding it. It's not just a scan, she said, shocked. It's a command. Someone just tried to trigger her. Rayner's heart dropped. Did it work? I don't think so, Lin replied. She's resisting it. That shouldn't be possible. Inside Sarah's mind. Meanwhile, in her small room, Sarah sat curled on the floor, clutching her head. Pain pulsed through her skull like fire. Images flashed before her eyes. Memories that weren't hers. Burning cities, screaming soldiers, voices yelling, activate Seraphim unit. And then, silence. She saw herself standing in the center of the chaos, emotionless, while people begged her to stop. But she hadn't moved, because someone else had been pulling the strings. She is awake. The door slid open. Rayner stepped inside. He saw her trembling, eyes wide with fear and confusion. I saw things, she whispered. I saw. Me. He knelt beside her. What did you see? I was bad. I hurt people. But I didn't choose it. I couldn't stop it. You were programmed, Sarah. You were made to be used. She shook her head. Then why didn't it work this time? Rayner looked at her, stunned. That question had only one answer. Because you're breaking free, he said. She looked up at him. I don't want to be a weapon. You're not, he said. You're human. More human than anyone who made you. The hunter awakens. But freedom had a price. The intercepted signal had come from deep space, from a ship hidden in a dead zone. That ship belonged to the Collector, a being obsessed with forgotten tech, lost soldiers, and powerful secrets. He now knew Sarah was awake. And he was coming. A secret meeting. Rayner contacted an old friend, an ex-human intelligence agent named Reese, now hiding in the outskirts of the galaxy. They met in a drifting station made of scrap and smoke. Reese stared at Sarah like he'd seen a ghost. Where did you find her? Slave auction, Rayner replied. She was in a cage. No one wanted her. She's not the only one left, Reese whispered. But she's the first to resist. Resist what? The kill code. Rayner froze. You mean they can still shut her down? Not just shut her down. They can erase her, wipe her mind, or worse, turn her into a bomb. Sarah stood silently, listening. Then why hasn't it happened yet? Rayner asked. Reese turned to her. Because she's different. Something in her broke the leash. The choice. Back on the ship, Sarah sat alone in the observation deck, watching the stars. She had no past, only pieces, but each moment on the ship gave her something new. A name, a voice, a choice. She thought about what Reese had said. She could be turned into a weapon again, or she could learn how to fight back. Not with power, but with will. She stood and walked to Rayner's room. I want to learn, she said. Learn what? Everything. Words, feelings, history, humanity. If they're coming for me, I don't want to be asleep when they arrive. Rayner nodded. Then we start now. The awakening begins. The stars outside drifted slowly, like glowing dust in an endless sea. Sarah sat on the floor of the training room, her legs crossed, her eyes closed. A soft hum filled the air. Her breathing was slow, steady, almost human now. Almost. Rayner stood quietly nearby, watching her. He could see the change. She was no longer the empty shell from the auction. Her body had begun to heal. Her voice had returned, even if it came in short, quiet words. And her eyes, once hollow, now searched, wondered, questioned. But inside her, the war was just beginning. Learning humanity. Over the next few days, Sarah trained with the crew. Not with weapons, with life. Dr. Lin taught her about emotions, joy, anger, sadness, what they meant, why they mattered. They showed her pictures of families, music, laughter, even tears. At first, Sarah didn't understand, but she tried. Every day. Meko helped her fix parts of the ship. He showed her how to hold a tool, how to fix a broken panel, how to listen to the engine like it was alive. Dex, the pilot, let her sit beside him in the cockpit. He explained how the ship moved, how stars bend under gravity, and how silence in space wasn't empty. It was peaceful. Sarah listened, absorbed, changed. One day, Rayner handed her a book, an old Earth novel about love and war. Sarah held it carefully, like it was something sacred. I want to read this, she said softly. You should, he smiled. That one saved me once. Small sparks. Sarah began dreaming. Not nightmares, not memories. Dreams. Of running through fields of grass, of warm rain, of a voice calling her name, not as a command, but as something soft. Sarah. One night, she stood alone under the observation window, watching a blue planet spin slowly below them. Rayner walked in and asked, What do you see? She took a moment before answering. Hope. Rayner's breath caught. He wasn't sure if he wanted to cry or salute her. But something was changing, deep inside her. Something real. But peace never lasts. The alarm rang at 300 hours. Red lights flashed. Incoming vessel. Meko shouted. No ID. It's cloaked but fast. Rayner rushed to the bridge. How close? Too close. They all knew who it was. The collector. Sarah stood behind Rayner, calm but alert. Her hands were trembling slightly. They found me, she said. What do we do? Rayner looked at her. What do you want to do? Sarah looked down. For the first time, she made her own decision. I want to stop running. The first test. The collector's ship dropped out of cloak. Black, massive, and silent. No warning. No words. Just weapons. They fired. Rayner's ship shook violently. Sparks flew. Shields dropped to 40%. We can't outrun it, Dex shouted. We don't need to, Rayner said. Sarah, you ready? She nodded. He handed her a small metal device, a neural stabilizer. This might help you focus your mind. But you don't have to fight. Not like a weapon. Just protect the ship. Protect us. Sarah placed the device on her temple, closed her eyes. Her body tensed. A soft blue light began to glow from her skin. Her pulse synced with the ship's energy field. Outside, the collector launched a boarding pod. It never made it. A sudden energy wave, pure and bright, erupted from the ship, pushed back the pod, scrambled its systems. Inside the ship, Sarah collapsed, but she smiled. The crew's decision. After the attack failed, the collector pulled back, but not for long. He now knew. Sarah wasn't just alive. She was awakening, and she was choosing. Raynor gathered the crew. They'll come again, stronger, with more ships, more traps. Miko crossed his arms. We could still turn her in, get paid, get safe. No, said Dr. Lin. She's human. We don't trade humans. Dex shrugged. Guess I'm in too. Not every day you get to help someone find their soul. They all turned to Sarah. You still want to keep going? Raynor asked her. Sarah nodded slowly. Yes, if I stop now, then they win, and I lose myself again. A spark of emotion. That night, Sarah sat alone again. This time, she cried. Not from pain, from choice. Raynor found her, sat beside her without a word. After a while, she whispered, I don't know why I'm crying. He smiled. Because you're human now. She looked at him. Was I never human before? Raynor thought for a moment. You were made human, but now you're becoming one. The threat from the past. The ship floated in orbit above a ghost planet, cold, gray, and dead. No lights, no signals, just silence. Raynor stood at the edge of the command deck, eyes locked on the surface. This is it, he said. Sarah stepped beside him. Where? He pointed toward the cracked planet below. Earth's shadow facility. Project Seraphim's final lab. The place where you were born. Sarah's hands trembled. Not from fear, but something deeper. A pull from the past. I don't remember it, she whispered. You weren't supposed to, Raynor replied. They made sure of that. A mission into silence. The crew prepared for descent. Raynor, Sarah, Dr. Lin, and Miko boarded the drop shuttle. The atmosphere was thin. No life signs, just ruins swallowed by ash and ice. As the shuttle touched down, winds howled across empty plains. They stepped into the darkness, flashlights cutting through dust and shadows. The entrance to the lab was buried beneath a collapsed mountain of stone, but the scanner still found it. Welcome, Director Raynor, the terminal said. Everyone froze. You were part of the project, Dr. Lin asked. Raynor nodded slowly, shame in his eyes. I helped build the original protection systems. I didn't know what they were really doing, until it was too late. Sarah stared at him, 1,000 thoughts running through her head. You helped make me, she asked. Raynor looked at her. No, but I helped build the prison they locked you in. The lab of forgotten things. The doors creaked open, revealing a massive underground complex, still powered after all these years. Inside were tanks, broken pods, metal chairs with straps, screens frozen with error codes. Sarah walked slowly, fingers brushing along the cold walls. She saw paintings drawn by children, her and others like her, pinned to the walls like memories no one wanted to keep. In a dark hallway, they found a locked room marked ERAP TLASA Emotional Failure Hoaldi. Inside was a cryopod, still active, and someone was inside. The other. The pod opened with a hiss. A woman stepped out, older than Sarah, but almost identical. Same eyes, same face, but hers were not filled with hope. They were filled with rage. Who activated me? She growled. Raynor stepped forward. My name is Raynor. We're here to. Her eyes locked onto Sarah. You, she whispered. I thought I was the last. You were the prototype. They said you failed. I don't remember anything. Sarah said softly. The woman stepped closer. They took it from you, just like they took everything from us. The truth. Her name was Ira, Sarah's older sister, the first successful Seraphim unit. She told them everything. We weren't made for peace, Ira said. That was the lie. They made us for control. Our love, our loyalty, our pain, all programmed. We were perfect because we felt. That's what scared them. They called it emotional failure, Rayner added, guilt burning in his voice. But it wasn't failure. It was humanity. They locked me here because I refused to follow their kill order, Ira said. I refused to erase a city. I cried instead. They called it a virus. I called it a soul. Sarah stared at her sister. For the first time, she saw a mirror, not just of her body, but her struggle. You fought back, Sarah said. I still am, Ira whispered. But they're still watching. The kill command. Suddenly, the walls lit up red. Warning. Remote command detected. A voice echoed through the base. Cold. Robotic. Inhuman. Subject Seraphim 42A. Active. Kill order initiated. Rayner ran to the console. They're trying to activate her kill sequence again. Sarah fell to her knees. Pain shot through her skull. Her vision blurred. Screams filled her head. Not outside, but inside. Old screams. Programmed screams. Obey. Destroy. Obey. I can't stop it, she cried. Ira knelt beside her, grabbing her shoulders. You can. Listen to me, Sarah. You're more than this. You broke it once. Do it again. Sarah's body began to glow. Her heartbeat thundered like war drums. Rayner shouted, Sarah, choose. And in that moment, she screamed, but not in pain, in defiance. The break. The glowing stopped. The signals died. The base lights returned to normal. Sarah lay on the floor, breathing hard. The kill command had failed. She had broken the control code with her will. Rayner ran to her, holding her close. You did it. Sarah looked at Ira. So can you. Ira stared at her hands. Maybe it's not too late. The final message. Before leaving, they downloaded the lab's last message, a record hidden by the creators of the Seraphim. If any of them ever wake, eliminate them. They are not human. They are hope turned into danger. Rayner shut off the file. Then will be the danger now, he said. To them. The decision. The stars above looked the same. But everything had changed. Rayner's ship hovered quietly in the void, just outside neutral space. Below them, the dead planet where the truth had been buried now sat exposed. The files they had recovered were already spreading across the dark web. Secrets don't stay buried forever, and neither did Project Seraphim. The message. The galactic authorities moved fast. A broadcast appeared on every screen inside the ship, red and official. This is the Galactic Council. Attention. Captain Rayner and his crew are charged with harboring a Class Black illegal bioweapon known as Subject 42A. You have 48 hours to surrender the subject. If you do not comply, you will be hunted, and your ship will be destroyed. No trial. No appeal. Rayner stared at the screen, jaw tight. They called her a bioweapon, Dex growled. They didn't even say her name. She has a name, Rayner said quietly. She's Sarah. The crew splits. The ship's war room fell into silence. Then came the arguments. We can't outrun the entire council fleet, Mako said. We'll be crushed. We have enough evidence to expose them, Lynn added. We could go public. Let the people decide. Rayner shook his head. They'll never let it reach the public. They'll erase us before it spreads. Then came the hard truth. If we give her up, Mako whispered, they'll let us walk. Sarah stood in the doorway, listening to every word. She didn't cry. She just watched. Her own voice. Later that night, Sarah sat alone with Raynor in the observation room. No stars this time, just silence and the hum of the engine. "I know what you're thinking," she said. "I don't want you to think that," Raynor replied. "If I leave, they might spare you." "No," he said firmly. "That's not the choice. That's a trap." Sarah looked down at her hands. "I was made to serve, made to be quiet, made to obey, but I'm not that anymore." Raynor turned toward her. "What are you now?" She met his eyes. "I'm someone who chooses." He smiled softly. "Then choose life." "I will, but not just mine." The broadcast that shook the stars. Sarah stepped into the main deck. Everyone turned. She held the drive containing the truth. Lab footage, kill commands, voice logs. All of it. "I'm going to speak," she said. Dr. Lin frowned. "To who?" Sarah pressed a button. The ship's signal burst out, hijacking a civilian frequency. A secret network. Underground. Untraceable. Just long enough. She stood in front of the camera. "I am not a weapon. I was created by humans, then thrown away by them. I was told I had no soul, no purpose, no right to feel." Her voice cracked, but she kept going. "But I do feel. I dream. I laugh. I cry. I choose." She held up the drive. "This is proof of what they did, not just to me, but to others like me. They erased us, called us failures, but we were never broken. We were just human." She ended the transmission and waited. The fleet arrives. 12 hours later, the sky lit up with warships. The Galactic Council had made their decision. They didn't care about the broadcast. They didn't care about the truth. They just wanted control. Sarah stood in the center of the ship's bridge, surrounded by the people who now chose her, not as a weapon, but as family. "What do we do now?" Dex asked. Raynor looked at Sarah. "We let her decide. The final choice." Sarah stood at the edge of the ship's control console. Option 1. Surrender. Save the crew. Sacrifice herself. Option 2. Run. Fight. Risk everything. And maybe still lose. Her hand hovered over the panel. Then slowly, she reached for something else. A hidden program. One she had built quietly with the help of Miko and Lin. A backdoor into every Seraphim signal left in the galaxy. Every sleeper. Every forgotten soul like her. "I'm not running," she said. "I'm waking them up." She pressed the key. The signal. Across the stars, silent minds stirred. In prisons, on distant slave ships, in forgotten labs. Eyes opened. Dreams returned. And for the first time in years, the galaxy felt a quiet tremor. Hope. Humanity reclaimed. Sarah sat in the middle of the ship's observation deck, staring out at the infinite void. The stars, once cold and distant, now looked alive, each one a tiny spark of hope. Her heart beat steady, but her thoughts raced. The signal had been sent. She had pressed the key. Across the galaxy, countless forgotten Seraphim were waking. Some in deep labs, others aboard slave ships, a few hidden in dusty storage cells. They were all hearing the same silent call. You are free. Remember who you are. But what would happen now? The Rising. Aboard the Galactic Council's flagship, Admiral Jethan glared at his monitors. The reports were coming in fast. "Sir," an officer said, panic in her voice, "we're detecting movement on over 200 abandoned Seraphim facilities. All inactive units are activating." "How is that possible?" Jethan barked. "They were shut down years ago." "It's her," the officer replied. "Subject 42A. She's calling them." The Admiral's fists clenched. "Prepare the fleet. Full deployment. If they rise, we will crush them." But even as the Council's warships mobilized, the Seraphim were not attacking. They were gathering. On a frozen moon near the Orion Arm, an old research bunker sprang to life. Glass pods shattered. Figures stepped into the icy air, men and women with glowing eyes, their minds no longer blank. On a derelict cargo freighter drifting through the Perseus sector, a young seraphim boy woke, curled in a corner. He had been sleeping for decades. Now he stood, stretched, and looked at the stars for the first time in his life. Throughout the galaxy, these beings, once labeled as weapons, as failures, were emerging, not as soldiers, but as survivors. Their awakening wasn't a call to war. It was a call to exist. A voice of humanity. Back on Rayner's ship, the crew gathered around the main console. Sarah had requested to speak to the fleet directly. Her voice broadcasted on every seraphim frequency, reaching the minds of her newly awakened kin. "I know you're afraid," she said softly. "You're remembering things that don't make sense. Pain that you don't understand. You might feel anger, or sorrow, or nothing at all." She paused, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I know what that's like. I've been there. But you're not alone anymore. You're not tools. You're not weapons. You're not what they made you to be." Her voice grew stronger. "You are human. And being human means you get to choose. Choose to be more than what they expected. Choose to protect each other. Choose to live, not as what they programmed, but as who you decide to be." Her words echoed across the void, reaching every seraphim. Some wept. Some smiled for the first time. Others simply closed their eyes and felt something new, hope. The Galactic Council's response. In the heart of the Council's war room, chaos reigned. Fleet commanders demanded orders. Politicians screamed for immediate suppression. Old generals called for the Seraphim's complete eradication. Admiral Jethan's voice boomed over the noise. "If we let them rise, they will destabilize the entire galaxy. We must act now." But not everyone agreed. A younger senator, her hands trembling, stood and spoke. "Maybe we need to stop seeing them as threats. Maybe it's time we listen." "Listen," Jethan sneered. "They are machines. Their existence threatens us all." "Are they?" She shot back. I heard her voice. It didn't sound like a machine. It sounded human. Her words caused a stir, small but real. In the shadowed corners of the room, cracks began to form. A new alliance. As the council argued, something unexpected happened. Seraphim ships began appearing in neutral territories, not as a fleet of war, but as a migration. Hundreds of vessels, many barely functional, gathered near the rim of known space. They formed a silent armada. They did not fire. They did not attack. They simply existed. And they sent one message back to the galaxy. "We are here. We are free. We will not be erased again." Among them were ships carrying humans, those who had fled oppression, those who believed in the Seraphim's right to live. Rayner's crew was among them, standing beside Sarah as she prepared to send one final transmission. The final broadcast. Sarah looked into the camera. The crew stood behind her. Rayner, Lynn, Mako, and Dex. All quiet, all ready. "This will be my last message," she said. She took a breath, steadying herself. She no longer felt like a weapon, no longer felt lost. For the first time, she felt truly alive. "We don't want war. We don't want to destroy. We don't want to hurt anyone." Her gaze hardened. "We only want to exist, to live, to be who we are. No more, no less." She looked straight into the camera. "If you attack us, we will not respond with violence. We will not give you the war you expect, because we've learned what it means to be human." Her voice softened. "It means choosing compassion over fear, forgiveness over anger, hope over destruction." The transmission ended, and across the galaxy, people watched, listened, and wondered, could she be right? A quiet revolution. Over time, the Seraphim became more than forgotten experiments. They became leaders, teachers, explorers. They forged alliances with free worlds, their wisdom and resilience inspiring movements across the galaxy. The council still viewed them as dangerous, but public opinion was shifting. More voices called for recognition, for acceptance. In the end, the seraphim did not need to fight to reclaim their humanity. They simply had to show they already had it.